Have you ever stood in a voting booth, holding that little stamp or, looking at the button on the EVM, and you freeze for a second?
The existential pause. Yeah, I know it well.
Exactly. You look at the list of names, and this sinking feeling just hits you in the gut. A little voice in the back of your head asks, does this actually matter? You
Yeah?
know? Is my vote changing anything, or is this all just theater?
That is a dangerous question. I mean, that's the kind of question that starts revolutions, or I guess more often in the modern world, it just creates this deep, deep cynicism.
It is, right. But it's a question we all ask ourselves. Is there some shadow group, some, I don't know, invisible hand pulling the strings behind the curtain? And even when our guy wins, why does it feel like the system itself, the machine, never actually changes?
Right.
Is bureaucracy just this necessary evil, or is it, as sociologists would say, an iron cage that we are all just trapped in?
You are hitting on the fundamental anxieties of modern political life. And believe it or not, these aren't just, late-night conspiracy theories you find on Reddit or hash out over chai at 2 in the morning. These are the absolute core questions of Chapter 7, Politics and Society.
And that is exactly where we are going today. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are doing something a bit special. We are tackling a full summary for UPSC aspirants, specifically curated by the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel.
And this is a heavy one. We aren't just talking about current events or, who won the last election. We are looking at the engine underneath the car. We're talking about power, the state, the very nature of democracy and social movements.
The goal here is simple, but I think pretty ambitious. We want to move beyond that surface-level political chatter and really build a sociological foundation strong enough for you to master the past year questions or PYQs. Because let's be honest, if you write a generic general studies answer in a sociology optional paper,
Oh, you will get a generic mark. And in UPSC, generic marks mean you don't make the list. It's as simple as that. If you can really grasp the theories we discussed today, you won't just pass an exam. You'll literally see the news differently. You'll start to see the strings.
I love that. See the strings. Now, before we dive into the deep end, I have a very important mission for you, the listener. This content, this level of detail, it takes a huge amount of work to put together. So we have a very humble request. Please, right now, just pause for a second and go subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel. It really does keep this content coming.
And look, if you're in a position to and you find real value in this, if this saves you 10, 20 hours of reading dense, dry textbooks, please consider supporting the channel on Patreon. Supporter contributions are absolutely vital for creating high-quality, in-depth breakdowns like this one. It's really the fuel for the engine.
And a huge, huge shout out to our existing supporters. You guys are the real MVPs. You are the reason this show is possible. Also, do the usual YouTube things, like the video, and more importantly, share a valuable comment. It genuinely helps the algorithm find other learners just like you.
And for those of you trying to take notes, don't worry about scribbling everything down and missing a concept. We've got you covered. Free notes, complete with practice PYQs, are available on a public Telegram channel.
But if you want the full VIP treatment, I'm talking access to all the videos in this series at once, plus the organized premium notes which have detailed breakdowns, extra PYQs, and even model mains answers, then you really need to join the private Telegram library. Just send a DM on the public channel to get the details on how to join. Okay, business aside, we have a massive roadmap today. What does the journey look like?
It's a big one. We're starting with the foundation, the sociology of power. What is it, really? Then we move to the who, the elite theories. Who actually rules society? From there, it's the how, the machine of the state, or bureaucracy. Then we'll clarify the core concepts like nation and citizenship. We'll look at how people fight back through social movements, and then finally, we'll wrap it all up with a dedicated mains answer building workshop.
That is a stacked lineup. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The sociology of power. Power is one of those words we use all the time. He's a powerful person. She's on a power trip, power outage. We use it so loosely. But sociologically, what are we actually talking about?
It's surprisingly slippery to define, isn't it? It's kind of like the word time. Everyone knows what it is until you have to explain it to someone. But the classic definition, the one you absolutely must know for the exam, comes from Max Weber.
Of course it's Weber.
It's always Weber. He defined power as, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, the chance of a man or a number of men to realize their own will in a communal action, even against the resistance of others.
Even against resistance. I like that. It strips away all the niceties, all the polite fiction. So, simply put, if I can make you do what I want, Even if you absolutely hate the idea of doing it, I have power over you.
Exactly. It's about the imposition of will. But, and this is a massive but probably the most important distinction in this entire chapter, we have to distinguish between power and authority.
Okay, unpack that for me. Because
Well,
in casual conversation, we use them as synonyms all the time. The authorities have the power to.
we do, but sociologically, they are worlds apart. Think about it this way. A mugger in a dark alleyway. He points a weapon at you and demands your wallet. You hand it over. Does he have power?
Absolutely. He's realizing his will against my very strong resistance. I definitely don't want to give him my wallet.
Correct. He has power. But does he have authority?
No, not at all. He's just a guy with a weapon. He has coercion, force, but not authority.
Right. Now, flip the script. Think about a police officer. If a police officer stands in the middle of the road and puts up a hand, you stop your car. Even if you're late, even if there's no other traffic, even if you don't want to. That officer has power, but they also have authority. Authority is legitimate power.
Legitimate. That's the key word, isn't it?
It's everything. It's power that we, the ruled, accept as right, just, and proper. Weber says authority is a form of legitimate power. It's the reason you stop at a red light at 2 a.m. when no one is looking. You aren't afraid the traffic light is going to beat you up. You accept the legitimacy of the traffic laws. You've internalized the rule.
So power is the raw ability to force someone, but authority is the recognized, accepted right to command.
Precisely. And in sociology, when we analyze power itself, we usually see a three-way debate. We can call it the theoretical triangle of power. You can almost imagine 3 groups of sociologists standing in 3 corners of a room yelling at each other about how power really works.
Okay, I like this image. Let's walk through the corners of this triangle. Who's in the first corner?
First up, we have the Weberian view. This is often called the zero-sum or constant-sum view of power.
Zero sum. That sounds like game theory. So that means for me to win, you have to lose. Right.
That's it exactly. Weber and those who follow him saw power as a fixed pie. There is only so much power to go around in a society. It's constant in quantum. If I have a slice of that power, that is, by definition, a slice you don't have.
So if the state gains more power to, say, surveil its citizens, then the citizens must lose power in the form of their privacy. It's a direct trade-off. This view implies that power is inherently about dominance, exclusion, and hierarchy. It's a fundamentally competitive thing.
It's a very cynical view of the world. I have it, you don't.
Yeah.
It sets up an inherent conflict. So who stands in the other corner and challenges that?
That would be the functionalists. Specifically, a thinker named Talcott Parsons. He comes at it from a completely different angle with his variable sum view.
Variable sum. So he's saying the pie can grow. Exactly. Parsons argues that power isn't just me versus you. He sees power as a generalized resource for the whole system. Think of it like money in an economy, or even better, like a battery for society. Power is generated by the society to achieve collective goals.
So if the government has a lot of power, let's say to tax us and build massive highways or hospitals, it's not necessarily bad for me as an individual. I lose some money in taxes, sure, but I gain a hospital. It might actually be a net good for everyone.
Precisely. Parsons would say that power is the capacity to mobilize society's resources to get things done that we couldn't do alone. Everyone wins if power is used effectively for the group. It's about cooperation and capacity, not just dominance. He'd argue we generate more power when we work together effectively.
It sounds incredibly optimistic. It's the kind of thing you'd read in a government brochure. We are empowering the nation.
It is very optimistic. It operates on the assumption that the leaders have the best interests of the entire group at heart, which of course brings us to the third corner of the triangle, the group that thinks Parsons is dangerously naive. The conflict view, led by our old friend Karl Marx.
Ah, Marx. I can guess where he stands on this. He's probably not singing Kumbaya with Talcott Parsons in the corner.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Marx brings us right back to coercion and dominance, but with a very specific economic twist. For Marx, power is, first and foremost, a tool of the dominant class, the bourgeoisie, the owners of capital, to suppress the have-nots, the proletariat. It's not just a fixed pie. It's a weapon used by one class against another.
And he brings in the idea of false consciousness, right, which is so important here.
That's absolutely crucial for Marx. He's wrestling with the question, why don't the poor just rebel? There are so many more of them. And he argues the ruling class uses their power not just to force people physically, with police and armies, but to fool them mentally.
So they create a system.
Exactly. A superstructure of institutions, religion, education, the media, that creates what he calls false consciousness. A state where the ruled accept their own powerlessness because they don't even understand the reality of their own exploitation. They believe the system is fair.
Okay, so just to recap the triangle before we move on, we have Weber, who says power is I win, you lose.
A zero-sum game.
Right, the fixed pie.
Then you have Parsons, the functionalist, who says power is we all win if we work together. It's a variable sum game.
It's a growing pie.
And finally, you have Marx, who says power is the rich use it as a weapon to crush and deceive the poor.
Class coercion. That is a perfect summary. If you can keep those three views distinct in your head, you have the foundation for almost any question on the theory of power.
This leads us directly into our next section because it begs the question, if power is so important, who actually holds it? In a democracy, we like to think we do. The people, government of the people, by the people, for the people, and all that. It's a beautiful sentiment, a noble ideal. But a lot of sociologists look at that and ask, is that actually true? Or is it a convenient illusion? This brings us to section 2, the elite theories. The premise here is, well, it's haunting. Democracy might just be a mask. A minority always rules.
And this is where we get into the lions and foxes, right?
Wow.
I love this imagery. It feels like something out of Game of Thrones.
It really does. This comes from the classical elite theorists, specifically two Italians writing in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Vilfredo Pareto and Gaetano Mosca. Now, context is really key here. They were watching the rise of socialism and mass democracy in Europe, and they were deeply, deeply cynical about the whole project. They thought the idea of mass rule was a complete joke.
Let's start with Pareto. He took a more psychological approach, didn't he?
Yeah.
He thought some people were just wired to be rulers.
Yes, Pareto believed that in every single society, no matter its form, there is inevitably a ruling minority. You can't avoid it. It's like a law of nature. And he categorized these elites based on their psychological traits, borrowing heavily from Machiavelli. He called them the lions and the foxes.
Okay, break down the lions for us. What are they like?
The lions are the elites who rule by force. They are conservative, strong, decisive. They value tradition, stability, and the status quo. Think of a military dictator, a feudal lord, or a hardline monarch. They don't play games, they crush opposition. If you protest, they send in the tanks. Their strength is their will, their weakness is their rigidity.
And the foxes?
The foxes are the cunning ones. They rule by manipulation, diplomacy, propaganda, and deal-making. They are innovative, adaptable, maybe a bit slippery. Think of the modern career politician who smiles, shakes your hand, kisses the baby, and then steals your watch without you even noticing. They rule through manufacturing consent, not through brute force.
So history is just a battle between these two types of elites.
Pareto called it the circulation of elites. He famously said that history is a graveyard of aristocracies.
That's such a metal quote.
It is, isn't it? And the cycle, he said, goes something like this. The lions rule for a while, but they lack cunning. They're too rigid, too unimaginative. Eventually, they get outmaneuvered by the clever foxes, so the foxes take over.
But they have their own weakness.
Exactly. The foxes lack the stomach for violence and decisive action. They let things get too chaotic, too permissive, too corrupt. When society gets messy and decadent, the masses cry out for a strong hand, for order, and the lions return to power to clean house.
And the cycle never, ever ends.
Never. The names change, the ideologies change. Maybe today it's capitalism versus communism, tomorrow it's something else, but the fundamental structure, a tiny minority ruling over a vast majority, never changes. The masses never truly rule. They were just the audience for this endless play.
That is just profoundly bleak. What about the other Italian, Mosca? Did he agree with this psychological take?
Gaetano Mosca agreed with the core premise, that a minority always rules. But he focused less on psychology, the lions and foxes, and more on something much more practical, organization.
What do you mean by organization?
He asked the simple math question. How can 100 people possibly rule over 100 million people? It seems impossible. But Mosca said the minority rules for one simple reason: they are organized. The majority is, by its very nature, unorganized. An organized group of 100 people acting in unison with a clear goal will always, always defeat an unorganized mob of 1,000 or even 1,000,000.
It makes a lot of practical sense. I mean, you can't get 1,000,000 people to agree on a lunch order, let alone run a country. The minority can communicate, they can plan, they can execute.
Exactly. For Mosca, democracy is just a system where the organized minority periodically asks the unorganized majority to validate their rule through an election. It's a ritual of legitimation.
Okay, so that's the classical Italian cynics. Now let's jump across the ocean and a few decades forward to the United States. C. Wright Mills. He wrote The Power Elite in the 1950s, a hugely influential book.
Mills is fascinating because he shifts the focus from psychological traits or general organization to specific institutional positions. He wasn't looking at whether you were a lion or fox or if you were smart or dumb. He was looking at what chair you sat in, what title was on your door.
And he identified a triangle of power in the U.S. at the time, right?
Yes, he argued that in mid-20th century America, real power wasn't in the town halls or with the voters. It was concentrated at the very top of three interlocking domains: the military, the federal government, and the major corporations.
And his big insight was that these aren't three separate worlds. They're all connected at the top.
Exactly. He argued that the people at the top of these three pyramids, the generals, the cabinet secretaries, the CEOs, form a single cohesive social class. He called them the power elite. They go to the same Ivy League schools, they belong to the same exclusive country clubs, their kids marry each other, they develop a shared psychology, a shared worldview, and shared interests.
And they rotate jobs between these sectors. This is the famous revolving door we still talk about today. You see a general retire from the Pentagon and immediately get a spot on the board of a defense contractor, or a Wall Street CEO becomes a Treasury Secretary.
Correct. Mills argued that this creates a unity of purpose among them. They look out for each other and for the system that benefits them all. Meanwhile, the rest of the population, you and me, were part of what he called the mass society. We're fragmented, unorganized, fed a diet of entertainment and distraction by the media, and we're basically just watching the show from the cheap seats.
So Pareto, Mosca, Mills, they all essentially say democracy is kind of a sham, a performance. Is there anyone who offers a counter-argument? Anyone who says, hey, wait a minute, the people do have a say in all this?
Yes, absolutely. That would be the pluralist thesis, a view championed by the political scientist Robert Dahl.
Okay, so Dahl is the optimist in the room.
Relatively speaking, yes. Dahl didn't just theorize from his armchair. He went out and did a detailed study of how decisions were actually made in the city of New Haven, Connecticut. And he argued that power in modern democracies is dispersed. He said there is no single, all-powerful power elite that rules everything. Instead, what we have is polyarchy rule by many.
How does polyarchy work in practice?
Dahl argues that different groups compete for influence in different arenas. One group might dominate education policy, maybe the teachers' union. A completely different group, say the farmers' associations, dominates agricultural policy. Yet another group of foreign policy experts and defense lobbyists influences international relations. Power is the result of constant bargaining and compromise between these various interest groups.
So nobody gets everything they want, but most groups get something. And the government's role is to act like a neutral referee, just balancing the demands of all these competing pressure groups.
That's the theory. Democracy isn't ruled by the people directly in this view. It's ruled by a multitude of interest groups who are representing different segments of the people.
But there's a critique here that is just screaming to be made, right? It feels a little naive to say a local farmers union has the same amount of power as a massive tech corporation like Google or Amazon, or a huge defense contractor like Lockheed Martin.
Exactly. That is the main critique of pluralism. It tends to ignore the massive inequality of resources. Sure, everyone is allowed to form a group and compete, but if I come to the bargaining table with a team of 100 lobbyists and $1 billion budget, and you come with a whisper and $5, is it really a fair competition? The pluralists often ignore the fact that the referee, the state, might be heavily influenced or even paid off by one of the teams.
That's a fair point. So we have this constant fight for power elites versus pluralists. But once a group has power, how do you actually run a modern country? You can't just shout orders from a palace. You need a machine. You need bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy.
Yeah.
The word that everyone loves to hate. If I say the word bureaucracy to you, what immediately comes to mind?
Oh, man. Long lines, endless forms in triplicate, people shouting, "It's not my job." Soul-crushing, beige-colored boredom.
Right. That's the popular image. But for sociologists, and again, specifically for Weber, it is the defining feature of the modern world. This brings us to Section 3, the machine of the state. Weber saw a massive historical shift in how societies were run. We moved away from traditional authority.
So kings, elders, we do it this way because we have always done it this way.
Exactly. And we moved away from charismatic authority.
Heroes, prophets, we do it because this person is magical and inspiring.
Right. We moved from those to legal rational authority.
And this connects back to our earlier power discussion. Legal rational authority is authority based on a system of rules, laws, and procedures that are believed to be rational and legitimate.
And the physical embodiment, the machinery of that authority, is the bureaucracy. To understand it, Weber created what he called an ideal type of bureaucracy. Now, for the listeners, it's really important to know that an ideal type in sociology doesn't mean ideal as in perfect or the best. It means pure or a theoretical model. It's a measuring stick to compare reality against.
Okay, so what are the features of this pure bureaucracy, according to Weber?
He listed several key characteristics. First, a clear hierarchy of authority, a chain of command. You know exactly who your boss is and who their boss is all the way to the top. It's a pyramid structure.
Got it. Second.
Specialization, a clear division of labor. You don't just work at the DMV. You are the specific person who handles license renewals for last names starting with A through M. You become an expert in your own tiny slice of the world.
Okay, hierarchy, specialization, what's next?
Third, and this is huge for Weber, written rules and files. The files define reality. If it isn't written down in the file, it officially didn't happen. This creates an institutional memory. The organization doesn't forget just because a particular person leaves their job. The knowledge stays in the files.
And fourth, impersonality. This sounds cold and negative, but Weber actually thought it was a very good thing.
It's absolutely crucial. It means the rules apply to everyone equally. No favoritism. The bureaucrat doesn't care if you are a prince or a pauper. You both need to fill out Form 1040-B. It removes personal bias, emotions, and nepotism from decision-making. In the old feudal system, you got things done because you were the duke's cousin. In a bureaucracy, you get things done because you follow the correct procedure.
And finally, there's merit-based recruitment. You get the job because you passed the exam and are qualified, not because you're the boss's nephew. And your official income is separate from your private life.
Right. And Weber argued that because of all these traits, the precision, the speed, the continuity, the lack of ambiguity, bureaucracy was the single most efficient way to organize large numbers of human beings ever invented. He compared it to a machine replacing hand labor. It was a revolution in social technology.
But, and there is always a but with Weber.
Yeah.
He wasn't a blind cheerleader for it. He saw the dark side. He saw that this beautiful, efficient machine could end up eating us.
And this brings us to Section 4, the iron cage and the critiques of bureaucracy. Weber himself had this deep fear that our obsession with rationality, with rules and efficiency, would become a trap. He famously said we would become specialists without spirit, sensualists without heart.
The iron cage of rationality. It's such a powerful, chilling image. We build this complex machine to serve us, to make life efficient and predictable, but we end up becoming servants to the machine. We become cogs.
We lose our autonomy. We lose our creativity. We just follow the rules because they are the rules. And other thinkers took this critique and ran with it, expanding on it significantly. Robert Michaels, for instance, gave us the devastating concept of the iron law of oligarchy.
This connects right back to the elite theories we were talking about. Oligarchy means rule by a few. So what is this iron law?
The law is simple and brutal. Who says organization says oligarchy.
Why? Why can't we have a truly democratic organization where everyone has a say?
Well, Michel's argued that any large organization, to be effective, needs leaders. You can't have a meeting of 10,000 members to decide every little thing, right?
Yeah.
It's just not practical.
Right, so you elect a smaller committee to make decisions.
Exactly. But as soon as you do that, that committee, those leaders, they start to gain skills the members don't have. They gain access to secret information. They control the communication channels. They become the experts. Meanwhile, the rank and file members become passive. They think, oh, the leaders are handling that. I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
Over time, the leaders start caring more about keeping their leadership positions and the perks that come with them than they do about the organization's original goals. They start serving their own interests, not the interests of the members.
So even a socialist party that was founded to fight for equality will eventually be run by a small, self-serving elite who just want to stay in charge.
According to Michel's, yes, it's an iron law. It applies to political parties, to trade unions, even to your local homeowners association. Organization inevitably leads to oligarchy.
Wow. Then we have another Robert Merton. He talked about the dysfunctions of bureaucracy.
Right. Merton was a functionalist, but he pointed out that things that are supposed to be functional can have unintended negative consequences or dysfunctions. For bureaucracy, the main dysfunction is that following the rules can sometimes defeat the entire purpose of the organization. He called this goal displacement.
Can you give me a concrete example of that?
The classic example is a hospital. What is the ultimate goal of a hospital?
To save lives. to heal people.
Right. But let's say a patient comes into the emergency room bleeding heavily, but they don't have the right insurance form signed. The bureaucrat at the admissions desk says, "I'm sorry, I can't admit you until this form is completed." In that moment, the rule, sign the form, which was meant to help the hospital run smoothly, has now displaced the ultimate goal, save the life. Following the procedure has become more important than the actual outcome. That is the essence of red tape.
We have all experienced that in some form. It's absolutely maddening. But there is also another critique that says, hey, wait a minute, real offices aren't full of these Weberian robots?
Yes. This is the crucial concept of informal bureaucracy, which was studied in detail by thinkers like Peter Blau and Alvin Goldner.
They didn't just theorize. They went into actual workplaces and observed what really happened, didn't they?
They did. Goldner did a famous study of a gypsum plant, and he found that if everyone followed the official rules 100% of the time, what's known as a work-to-rule strike, the entire plant would grind to a halt within hours.
Really? Following the rules perfectly would cause it to fail.
Absolutely. He found that real efficiency often relies on bending or even ignoring the formal rules. It relies on what he called the indulgency pattern, a manager letting a good worker come in late because they know they stayed late yesterday, or two workers trading favors to get a job done faster, or cutting a corner on a procedure to get a critical shipment out on time. The informal network, the water cooler talk, the friendships, the rivalries, is actually what makes the organization function.
So the ideal type that Weber described is really just a myth. The reality is messy and human and full of these informal workarounds.
Always. And for your exam, being able to contrast Weber's clean ideal with Goldner's messy reality is a sign of a very sophisticated understanding.
Okay, this is great. We've covered power, elites, and the machine of bureaucracy. Now, we need to clarify some of the fundamental words we often use interchangeably but really shouldn't. This is section 5. Core political concepts. And I want to start with the big one. Nation versus state.
This is a favorite trap for students on exams. A state is, first and foremost, a political apparatus. It has a government, a clearly defined territory with borders, and crucially, that Weberian monopoly on the legitimate use of physical force within that territory. It's a legal political entity.
So the state has the police, the army, the courts, the tax collectors. It's the hardware of government.
That's a good way to think of it. A nation, on the other hand, is psychological. It's a community of sentiment. It's a group of people who feel they belong together because of a shared culture, a shared language, a shared religion, or a shared history and destiny.
So you can have a nation without having a state.
Absolutely. Think of the Kurds. They are a distinct people with a shared culture and language. They are a nation. But they are spread across the state borders of Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Iran. They do not have their own independent state. They are a classic example of a stateless nation. Conversely, you can have a state with many nations inside it.
And the nation-state is the modern ideal where the two are supposed to match up.
Yes. The nation-state is the ideal where the cultural boundaries of the nation match the political boundaries of the state. France for the French people, Japan for the Japanese people. Though in reality, almost all modern states are multinational. India is a prime example. One state, but many distinct nations or large cultural groups within it.
Now, what about the term citizenship? There's a famous breakdown of this by T.H. Marshall that traces how our rights as citizens have grown over time.
Yes, Marshall's work is foundational here. He described the evolution of citizenship rights in 3 main stages, looking primarily at the history of England. First, he said, in the 18th century, we got civil rights.
Okay, what does that include?
This is about individual freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to own property, and the right to get justice in a court of law. It's the classic liberal freedoms.
The liberty phase. What came next?
In the 19th century, the struggle was for political rights. This is the right to participate in the exercise of political power, basically the right to vote and the right to hold public office. This is when democracy really starts to expand beyond just the wealthy landowners.
They're finally the third stage.
In the 20th century, we see the rise of social rights. This is the welfare state, the right to a certain level of economic welfare and security, the right to education, to health care, and to a minimum standard of living. Marshall's crucial insight was that to be a true, full citizen, you need to be able to live a civilized life, not just cast a vote. If you are starving or uneducated, your right to vote is almost meaningless.
Civil, political, and social. It's a really neat and powerful progression. But let's bring it back to the people again. Sometimes the people don't just vote or fill out forms. Sometimes they get mad, they organize, they take to the streets. This brings us to Section 6, collective action and social movements.
And we have to start here with the concept of civil society.
The famous third sphere.
Yes. It's not the family, which is the private sphere. It's not the state, which is the sphere of government. And it's not the market, which is the sphere of business. It's the space in between where we voluntarily organize ourselves. NGOs, religious groups, book clubs, trade unions, resident welfare associations.
Thinkers like Alexis de Tocqueville absolutely loved the idea of civil society.
He saw it as the essential watchdog of democracy. He argued that if you have a strong, vibrant civil society, it acts as a buffer against state power. It prevents the state from becoming tyrannical because the people are organized and connected to each other in webs of trust. If the government tries to oppress you, you're not alone. You have your church group or your union or your neighborhood association to back you up.
But why do people actually rebel? What makes a social movement start? You would think, intuitively, if people are very poor, they'd be the ones to rebel. But history shows that's not always true.
In fact, it's almost never true. The absolute poorest of the poor rarely rebel. They are often too atomized and too busy trying to survive day to day. One of the most powerful explanations is relative deprivation theory.
Relative deprivation, meaning it's not about how poor I am in absolute terms, but how poor I feel compared to who?
Exactly. Compared to what you expect to have, or compared to a reference group you see on TV or in your neighborhood. If everyone in the village is equally poor, there's often stability. But if you see your neighbor suddenly getting rich from a new factory while you stay stagnant, that is what creates the anger and the sense of injustice. Revolutions often happen not when things are at their worst, but when they are getting better, just not fast enough to meet rising expectations.
That's so fascinating, counterintuitive. Then you have Neil Smeltzer and his structural strain theory.
Smeltzer's theory is very systematic. He treats the birth of a social movement like a chemical reaction. He gives us a kind of checklist. He says you first need structural conduciveness. The system is set up in a way that allows a movement. Then you need structural strain, a problem like inequality or injustice. Then a generalized belief emerges, a shared story about what the problem is and who is to blame. And finally, you need precipitating factors, a specific spark like a police shooting or a sudden spike in bread prices to set it all off.
But then a thinker like Charles Tilly comes along with resource mobilization theory and says, hold on, people are always angry about something.
Right. Tilly is the ultimate pragmatist. He says grievances and strains are constant in any society. There is always something to be mad about. The real question isn't why are people angry, but why does a movement happen now and not some other time? And his answer is, movements only happen when a group can effectively organize and mobilize resources.
So things like money, leaders, media attention, office space, lawyers.
Exactly. You can't have a revolution without logistics. For Tilly, a social movement is less an emotional outburst and more of a rational political process of gathering resources to challenge the existing power structure.
That is a very businesslike view of protesting. Now, tell me about the crucial difference between old and new social movements. This is a really big topic in contemporary sociology.
It is. Old social movements were, for the most part, class-based. Think of the great labor unions fighting against the capitalist owners in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Their goals were primarily material. They wanted higher wages, better working hours, workplace safety. They wanted to seize political power.
And the new social movements, or NSMs?
These are the movements that really emerged from the 1960s onwards. Think of the feminist movement, the environmental movement, LGBTQ plus rights movements, the anti-war movement. They aren't usually fighting for a bigger paycheck. They are fighting for things like quality of life, for identity, for human rights, and for autonomy.
The famous slogan, "The personal is political."
Exactly. Their battles are often cultural as much as they are political. They tend to be organized as loose, decentralized networks rather than the rigid hierarchical structures of the old trade unions. Thinkers like Jürgen Habermas discuss this as a struggle to defend the life world, our personal lives, cultures, and identities from being colonized by the bureaucratic state and the capitalist market.
All right, we have built a massive foundation here. We've got the theories of power, the nature of the state, the core concepts, the critiques. Now it is time to put all of this to the test, literally.
It is time for the Mains Answer Building Workshop. This is where the rubber really meets the road for our UPSC aspirants.
This is Section 7. We are going to take real past year questions, PYQs from the UPSC exam, and we're going to break them down piece by piece. I'll play the role of the student trying to structure the answer, and you give me the expert content to fill it in.
Ready? Ready. Let's do it.
Okay, PYQ number 1. What, according to Robert Michaels, is the iron law of oligarchy? Do lions and foxes in Vilfredo Pareto's theory essentially differ from each other? Substantially.
Ooh, a doubleheader. They've combined two different theorists in one question. This is designed to test your ability to not just recall facts, but to synthesize and compare them.
All right, so the directive here is substantiate, which means I can't just state things, I need to back them up with evidence and logic. Structure-wise, I think I'd have to start by defining the iron law of oligarchy.
Right. You have to start with Michael's, you state the law. Who says organization says oligarchy? But don't just state it, you have to explain the mechanism we discussed earlier. You walk the examiner through the logic. Large organizations need leadership to be efficient. Those leaders gain specialized skills and control information. The general members become apathetic and defer to the experts. Over time, the leaders become a class of their own, focused on preserving their own power.
Okay, got the Michael's part down. Then I need to pivot to the second part of the question about Pareto. It asked, do lions and foxes essentially differ? That word essentially feels like a trap.
It is the absolute key to the question. On the surface, of course, they differ. A lion rules with force, a fox rules with cunning. Their methods are polar opposites. You have to acknowledge that first.
But essentially, that's asking about their core function, not their methods.
Precisely. Essentially, in terms of their function within the social system, they are identical. They're both ruling minorities. Their fundamental role is to maintain the elite status and to exclude the masses from any real power. Whether I dominate you by punching you in the face or by tricking you into giving me what I want, the end result is the same. I am dominating you.
So the synthesis at the end would be something like, while their tactics differ, both theorists fundamentally agree that true democracy is an illusion and that society will always be divided into a ruling elite and a ruled mass. They just describe the nature and behavior of that elite in different ways.
Perfect. That is a high-scoring synthesis. You've addressed both parts of the question and then connected them with a concluding insight.
Let's try PYQ number 2. Examine the relevance of corporate social responsibility, CSR, in a world marked by increasing environmental crises.
Okay, now this one looks like it could be a general studies or even an ethics paper question, but be very careful. You're in a sociology exam. You need to wear your sociologist hat. Do not write a generic answer about pollution and planting trees.
Right. I need to connect this immediately to the concepts from this chapter. So
Yeah.
I should frame this in terms of pressure groups and civil society.
Exactly. You frame environmentalism as a quintessential new social movement, NSM. You explain that civil society, through these environmental NSMs, is exerting immense pressure on the market, the corporations, and the state to change their behavior. CSR isn't just companies suddenly becoming nice and altruistic. It's often a strategic response to a legitimacy crisis created by these social movements.
So the companies are trying to maintain their authority, their legitimacy, in the face of public anger and protest. CSR is a tool for that.
Yes. So you use sociological terms. You talk about civil society activism, legitimation crisis, new social movements, and the changing relationship between the state, market, and civil society. That is what transforms a generic GS answer into a specific high-scoring sociology answer. That's how you get the extra marks that make the difference.
Okay, next one. PYQ number 3, a real classic. Distinguish between power and authority.
This is a straightforward foundational question. The key here is clarity and precision. Do not overcomplicate it.
I would go straight to Weber, right from the first sentence.
Yes. Define your terms using the master. Power, the ability to enforce your will even against the resistance of others. It's based on coercion. Authority, power that is seen as legitimate, as right and proper by those who are subject to it. It's based on consent.
And I should definitely use examples to make it clear.
Always. Examples are your best friend. The mugger has power, the policeman has authority. A military dictator who seizes control has power. A democratically elected prime minister has authority. And then you can add a layer of sophistication by briefly mentioning Weber's 3 types of legitimate authority. Traditional, the queen, charismatic Gandhi, and legal rational, the prime minister or judge.
Okay, last one for the workshop. PYQ number 4. Bureaucracy in real life is different from the ideal, typical bureaucracy.
This is a classic critique question. It's asking you to critique Weber using other sociological studies.
So the structure would be, step 1, briefly and accurately list the key characteristics of Weber's ideal type. Hierarchy, written rules, impersonality, and so on.
Step 2, immediately pivot to the reality. You say, however, empirical studies have shown that real-life bureaucracies diverge significantly from this ideal type. And then you bring in your evidence, Goldner and Blau. You must talk about the existence and importance of the informal bureaucracy.
And I should also mention that The very things that are supposed to make it efficient, like strict adherence to rules, can actually cause dysfunctions. And I bring in Merton's concept of goal displacement and red tape. Real life runs on human connections and workarounds, not just the official file system.
Exactly. The ideal type is the blueprint, the skeleton, but real life is the flesh and blood, which is always much, much messier. That's the core of the answer.
This workshop is making me realize just how interconnected all these topics are. You can't really answer the bureaucracy question without understanding power and authority, and you can't answer that environmental CSR question without understanding social movements in civil society.
That is the beauty and sometimes the challenge of sociology. It's a web. Everything connects to everything else.
Okay, before we wrap this up completely, let's do a rapid-fire matchmaker round. I'll name a thinker. You give me the key concept they're associated with.
Let's do it. Go.
C. Wright Mills.
The power elite. The triangle of military, government, and corporations.
Pareto.
Circulation of elites. Lions and foxes.
Robert Meikles.
Iron law of oligarchy.
Robert Dahl.
Pluralism. The idea of polyarchy.
Max Weber.
So many, but for this chapter. Ideal type bureaucracy and the iron cage.
T.H. Marshall.
The 3 stages of citizenship. Civil, political, social.
And finally, a slightly trickier one. Talcott Parsons.
Variable sum power. Power as a collective resource for society.
Boom. If you can remember those key connections, you have the skeleton of this entire complex chapter right there in your mind.
And remember the core conceptual pairs, zero sum versus variable sum power, nation versus state, old versus new social movements.
So let's land this plane. After the incredibly dense discussion, what is the mains insight, the big so what, for the listeners getting ready for their exam?
The insight is this. When you are writing answers on Indian politics in your mains exam, especially in the sociology paper, but even in GS, you cannot just quote the Constitution and the laws. That is civics, not sociology. You have to analyze the sociological engine running underneath the formal political structure.
So don't just say the law was passed. You have to ask, which pressure groups pushed for it? Which caste or class elites resisted it? What social movements on the ground created the political will to make it happen?
Exactly. Politics isn't just about what happens in parliament or during elections every 5 years. It's about the constant negotiation of power that happens in every interaction. It's the bureaucrat at the government office desk. It's the protest march in the street. It's the powerful lobbyist in the hallway.
The real aha moment is realizing that power is everywhere. In everything.
And realizing that while Weber's iron cage might be real and disheartening, the keys to unlocking it, or at least navigating it, are in our hands if we understand how the lock actually works.
That is a very powerful thought to leave our listeners with. So listeners, if this deep dive helped you see some of the invisible strings of politics and society, please do us a huge favor right now and go subscribe to Simplified UPSC by PPP on YouTube. We absolutely need your support to keep this engine running.
And a humble request once again, if you are able to, please consider supporting the show on Patreon. It truly is what allows us to dedicate the time to do this level of research and synthesis for you.
And don't forget all the resources we've created. Free notes and practice PYQs are waiting for you on the public Telegram channel. But for the really serious learners, you should join the private Telegram library. You get the premium notes, the model answers, the entire video archive, all in one place. Just DM the public channel to join.
And please, like this video, share a comment. Tell us which theory best describes your workplace or your college. Is it an iron cage, a pluralist paradise, or is there an iron law of oligarchy at play?
We read every single comment. Thank you for diving deep with us today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we will see you in the next deep dive.
Goodbye, everyone.